So good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Cote. Again, I'm the Senior Director of Statewide Civic Engagement for Rocky Mountain Public Media. We are Rocky Mountain PBS, The Drop, and Kuvo Jazz. And we're here tonight on our third installation of Above the Noise Conversations that we started back in August. Our first one was Understanding the Debate, Media Bias, Public Trust, and the Role of Public Broadcasting. That was sort of the overall umbrella of this series, where we had our CEO and the CEO of Wyoming PBS talking about the need for public media and how the funding cuts impacted us and what we were all going to do about it. Our second session was conversations on trust, bias, and belonging in media, building trust in news, principles for journalists and citizens. And there we talked to Sally from the Trust Project and our own journalist, Kyle Cook, and Dana from the Colorado Sun. This time, culminating our whole series is Above the Noise, Trust, Bias, and Belonging, Press Freedom Under Pressure, Journalists at the Frontlines. I'm very excited for this conversation and just wanted to let you know that we will record this session, put it up on YouTube, and share it with all of our viewers on the RMPBS YouTube site. We'll be sharing it with our colleagues who are here on our panelists today so they can share it as well. And this is a very interactive session in that we already took questions from audience members who registered, and the questions that Gabriela will be posing are from the audience. We had so many great questions that we really had to theme how we wanted to address them all. So if you don't hear your exact question, we hope you will hear and see yourself in the theme of the questions that Gabriela asks. Finally, we will be taking questions in our Q&A button at the bottom. So if you're listening and you have questions that you want to ask Patrick, Gabriela, or Madison, please drop it in the Q&A and I'll be sure to do my best to share with them as we go. There will be a part of this session in which you will be able to do a lot of engagement after you've done some listening. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand it over to Gabriela to moderate the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. Thank you all for being here today. As Amber said, I'm Gabriela Resto-Montero. I'm the Senior Journalism Director at Rocky Mountain PBS. And I am also very excited about this conversation today and very happy to be here with Madison and with Patrick, because I can tell you in our newsroom and in so many newsrooms across the country, we are having these conversations about press freedom, how we adapt, how we maintain and keep and develop the trust of the communities we serve, how we better serve those communities, all of these questions. So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation. As Amber previewed, we're going to have a section where we have all of the questions, well, all of the themed questions that so many of you shared with us earlier today. And those are, earlier these weeks leading up to this event. They're all centered around trust and misinformation, sustainability of journalism, technology, AI, and media labels, journalistic ethics and accountability, and my favorite, audience and community action. So light work for Tuesday evening, it's going to be great. So I just wanted to formally introduce and welcome Madison Karras and Patrick Boehler. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to kick it off to them, but very quickly. Patrick, he is a journalist and media leader with experience at Radio Free Europe, the New York Times. He's the founder of Gazzetta, and he is known for his work in advancing press freedom and newsroom innovation, which is something that is so crucial in this moment that we find ourselves in. Madison Karras is also a journalist and a documentary filmmaker whose work spans local and national newsrooms, including the Tiny News Collective, which is a community-led, sustainable journalism initiative that works across the country. So we're very lucky to have them here tonight. Thank you so much. I'm going to kick it over to Madison, and she can make her introduction, and then we'll move into a presentation from both Patrick and Madison about just the moment we find ourselves in and what the opportunities are, and what we're facing. So thank you all so much. Madison, take it away.
Thank you both, Amber and Gabriella, and thank you everybody for joining here tonight. I'm really happy to dig into the conversation as we had so many great questions spanning from press freedom to trust to, as Gabriella mentioned a little bit about changing relationships between journalists and audiences and what we can do about it and where we're going from here. We'll share a little bit more about things that Patrick and I have been working on recently, but a little bit about me. I started my career as a journalist in Philadelphia and have since, as Gabrielle mentioned, worked with startup newsrooms across the country and have seen a lot about how different formats of journalism are evolving the last few years and both what the risks and opportunities that we're seeing are. And so just excited to be in conversation with you all tonight and hear a little bit about where you're coming from too in our Q&A portion at the end.
I'll just get the slides fired up. Just a second. Let's see. Does this work? Can you see the slides? Fantastic. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Patrick, and I'm so excited to get to talk to you about the work that been doing with Madison and generally also kind of how we think about what can be done in this really difficult moment for media. We prepared a couple of slides for you just in terms of like how to say to guide the conversation. We'd love to talk to you about the current challenges that we see in journalism, where we see opportunities of redefining what journalism can be or can do for communities. Your fantastic questions that we got to see, but then also really if there are other questions, would love to read them as well. So please just submit them in the Q&A and then hopefully have a bit of a discussion. For me, I was a reporter in several countries, working for local publications, and in most of the contexts that I've worked in, they were kind of ahead of the curve compared to the US in terms of this autocratic backsliding that we've seen globally. And I had to witness firsthand in the newsrooms that I worked in how they have struggled with an increasingly polarized environment and political repression and and worse. And in this, the last such role was with Radio Free Europe, where I worked on their digital transformation during the war in Ukraine, but also the war in Armenia and Azerbaijan and some other conflicts, and also worked in contexts such as Iran, Afghanistan, China, and some other places where really autocratic regimes are making journalism really hard. And that's why I started Gazzetta 2 years ago here in New York to think about, okay, what is it? What if we decoupled the work of journalism from the political systems and just think about it? How can we root it in service for communities? And in this way, make sure that journalism has a way of continuing to be of use to societies, no matter what the political situation is. Madison, that was your intro, but if you want to add.
Yeah, just expanding on a little bit of what I mentioned about my career journey, starting in local reporting in Minneapolis and Philadelphia. I did a lot of coverage on service and care industries, and then I kind of saw firsthand in that role the evolving relationship that a lot of really tight-knit and vulnerable communities were having with newsrooms and their trust and interactions and differences in what people wanted to see in news versus what was being covered in especially hyperlocal news, and moved from there to work a lot with small newsrooms and collaborative journalism, about how we can reimagine different types of reporting and roles and leverage our expertise kind of across community journalism. And for the past couple of years, I've been working with news startups and big and large at the Baltimore Banner, and also at the very smallest level with picture on the right there, a small local media outlet in Philadelphia called Dos Puntos Platform, reporting on Latino immigrant communities in the greater Philadelphia area. And now I'm in roles that kind of combine a little bit of all of the above, focusing on service design and opportunities, and how newsrooms can use both research and product strategies to combine and align on editorial opportunities for service and creating better community outcomes for all, which we'll dig into a little bit tonight. So, um, and looking at all of the great questions that came in tonight, we found that they kind of span the shift in what we see between these two photos of, like, on the left, and thinking about our old and traditional ways and roles of journalism, and being kind of an authoritative gatekeeper of information, in prior roles where we were kind of the mastheads and pillars of the press, and had our own platforms and systems to produce and distribute journalism to audiences across the airwaves, across the papers, across televisions, what have you, just a few decades ago. And now what this very different information ecosystem looks like a little bit more on the right, where our complete marketplace and landscape for journalism has changed, with how our readers, with how our audiences, wherever they might be, whether that's hyperlocal, local, national, or even far, far away from where we're creating reporting, are reaching us and getting to us. And within all of this transition from both the left to the right, there's been a lot of different layers of friction and kind of new things that journalists need to deal with to produce relevant and useful information to audiences, which your questions kind of spanned between, as far as fragmenting trust between audiences and journalists, some of the political pressures that we're now seeing journalists experience, again, at all different levels of government, and of course, all the different new platforms and types of ways that we are creating information, and who else is in our ecosystem alongside us. So that being said, broadly, a journalism and the economy and marketplace that journalism is operating within has leveled out now. We're no longer just the prime single watchdog and gatekeeper and sole providers of information. We're now in this space that we call the attention economy, where we are on the same playing field as everybody else who is trying to get our audience's attentions on the platforms that we deliver information, whether that's our websites, whether that's our social media, whether that's even just information when you walk outside and look at street signs. But the thing here is that this attention economy is distorted, and it's not fair, and it's not set up in a way that is conducive to journalism, and is conducive to putting out useful, practical information that helps people. There's a lot of these big major players, many of them from the tech world, other forces involved too, that have kind of their own algorithms, that have their own priorities and their own things that they want to get the same people who we're trying to reach with information to do. And all of this together has put a lot of different forces on journalism, and how we're able to reach audiences, and the types of methods and reporting that we have to do to get to audiences.
In free contexts and so-called free contexts, I think a lot of journalists are working in using strategies where they are trying to like get closer to the audience within this attention economy. And there is, if you think of this, a theoretical Venn diagram as like we produce information and the audiences see information that's relevant for them. And then there's this opportunity in the middle where demand and supply meet. Just to Madison's point just now, that has been distorted in free contexts because of this algorithmic distortion, right? There are these intermediaries that prevent that from happening. And if you look at autocratic contexts like say Russia, China, Iran, um, but also Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, what have you, you will see that this is actually exacerbated. This gets more and more extreme, and where you have governments actually controlling platforms, you have harassment at scale, you have threats, violence. And also just economic exclusion, that there's just no way of possibly running an information service in this information space. And that, in a way, leads to a problem for but it leads to huge problems for society overall. But for journalism, if we don't step out of this, we are in a vicious cycle where these systemic constraints, we have inadequate responses to these systemic constraints, and that leads to us not being part of people's lives. That makes us less relevant. That gives us less leverage, which increases the constraints, and kind of journalism kind of disappears from people's lives. And I have seen that in my own life when I studied in China. There were outside of our university campuses, people would trade old copies of The Economist or Time magazine because of the authority and the aspirational appeal that these publications had. That is not happening nowadays, right? That is far from, because it's kind of faded into the distance. And now we are in this world where we can't bring that back, but we have to build again. And a big reason why we have this irrelevance is really because we have tried to focus on reach. We've tried to reach people in this broken system that is rigged against us. And that has in turn exacerbated our irrelevance. And so you see this relevance gap is widening. And so what can we do when this relevance gaps is widening? And our research shows that people really turn away from this kind of habituated consumption of media that was broadcast in the past, and turn to friends, family, WhatsApps, messaging groups, Facebook groups, what have you. And it also leads to information overload, leads to avoidance of critical issues that we feel very strongly about, because people just have to, there's no filter other than their own, so they have to filter themselves. And this disconnect kind of then further exacerbates the kind of the distance between journalists on the one side and people just living their lives on the other.
So we know that this gap exists, but also on the business side of journalism and how our business and financial models have evolved over the years, we haven't really taken this into account. The way that newsrooms have been set up to sustain themselves and receive revenue in order to keep producing journalism has been optimized for a whole different context in a whole different era. And we've been set up in a way to use our systems to generate revenue more like a tech company rather than an information service, and an information service that can take into account some of those different relationships with both relevance and trust that Patrick was talking about. Our Some of our business models, like our advertising models, reward things more like our attention and volume and quantity of clicks, which kind of has led a lot of journalists and great legacy publications that we've all seen over the years into more clickbait traps and into producing things that may generate more extreme reactions and sharing from people and virality rather than information that people can actually use and core news about whatever community they're living in. So this has kind of further contributed to the problem of what we're seeing as success in journalism and what in the direction that newsrooms are built to go into versus what people are actually looking for out of us. So all of this together has kind of led us to this moment that we are in now of of all of this times of change with like we need to reevaluate our business models. We need to take a look at all the different ways that we are producing journalism and how we're being responsive to all the different moments of various information sources that people are getting from anywhere from creators to AI bots to news information now. And it's forcing us to take a look at what we actually bring to people and the value that they're getting out of us, how we measure that, and how we measure what comes as a result of our journalism, and how we're asking people to join in and participate with us. And so we believe that this requires journalism to assert itself as a more serviceable entity that actually enables people to make change and to make a difference in their life with the information that they give. Um, that being said, we know that as there's all of this change happening within the broader world, that communities and the people that we're serving are not waiting for journalists to figure out our business models and to figure out how we want to evolve to adjust to all of this. There's their own ways that they are getting information, and that whether they choose to follow and subscribe to us and support us or not. Um, so taking a little bit of a look at the things that are working and the different models that we're seeing from these new forms of journalism, whether that's creators, whether that's emerging news outlets or adapting news outlets. There's kind of these core functions that we're seeing connect people and that we're seeing kind of prevail through this evolution of information. And first and foremost, that's communities being able to verify information kind of through consensus, through sharing it with their friends, through discussing it with others. There were a lot of questions that came in tonight about how to verify information and how to um, approach conversations with others about the new types of information that we're getting. And we see that whether it's in a Facebook group, whether it's in the comments of a creator, or whether it's a newsroom responding to an article that they posted on social media, there's kind of this network effect that happens that especially when people have mixed emotions or mixed reactions to information that they're able to seek verification for. As well as to that same point, people being able to share news and information organically over trying to maximize and hack algorithms based on reach. We're looking for more peer-to-peer sharing where people are commenting and telling and commenting and telling their friends to join into the conversation. And as well as all of those things stacked together through repeated interaction, repeated behaviors, participating in these same cycles and being able to um, follow their same information sources along and being able to remember it and have it stick with them. Um, so that being said, uh, there's an entire field of opportunities for these types of information interactions, for these types of exchanges, for these types of relationships to build around information needs that communities have. thinking about how we get back, like thinking of how we get out of the cycle of clickbait journalism and kind of generating reaction and generating interest based on just quantity and growth. There's opportunities that newsrooms have to be able to fill needs within local communities and be of service, whether that's for um, producing information around navigating local health and welfare systems, education, economic opportunities, and how people can progress and grow together in their communities, as well as just getting together about how people want to build and interact with civic-specific systems wherever they live, whether hyperlocal, local, national level, or beyond. So when we take a look at these opportunities and focus a little bit more on the specific things that we can do to get out of a clickbait cycle and root people in local information that they can use. It kind of changes our models a bit from this, the principles of traditional journalism that we were talking about, where we were kind of this institutional one-to-many broadcast and kind of had an arm's length away from a relationship from our readers and who we were producing news for, to a little bit more target focused, where we can be sharing information that people can act on to create some of those mutual exchanges and create some of those connections that they want to share and bring others into the conversation, and where we're creating something that's a little bit more organic and cyclical that people can live in instead of just moving one by one, waiting for our next broadcast or waiting for um, the next hit of something to be reacting to.
And that's why we've been in our conversations really with newsrooms across the United States and internationally, really talking about the urgent need for a radical mindset shift, which is particularly hard in moments of political crisis because we kind of want to preserve and maintain kind of systems, political systems and institutions that we feel are under threat. And um, and um, and and actually that ends up being slightly somewhat counterproductive because we don't have that razor sharp focus on utility, on service for people as these institutions may become weaker or get hijacked or no longer serve the public good. And that's why we were kind of talking about from kind of these declarative, moving away from these declarative performative acts of journalism to one that is focused on service. Um, this isn't easy because it really requires a fundamental change in terms of how we think of journalism, and especially in the international media space. A lot of journalism got funded as the kind of development work, and domestically, a lot of journalism gets funded as like the forces state that, and the theory of change is that it enables a participatory citizenry, um, and we are encouraging to kind of shift away from that and think more about a theory of service in terms of how can we provide utility to people on a functional level, in terms of how to navigate their lives on a psychological level, in terms of how to come to terms with whatever situation they're in, and on social level in terms of how to find and rekindle community. And in this way, kind of rebuild from a foundation that is rooted in not in institutions, but in people. And so really what the ultimate challenge and then kind of for every news organization in this way then becomes is what can we do to help people navigate their lives better? So we're not assuming that we have any kind of determinative impact on the actions of people, that we can influence them to, vote more, what have you, or convince them to whatever. but really just help them navigate their lives as they live it in a better way and do that at scale. And that is our way kind of out of this impasse. And that also is roots our editorial independence in service to people. So if we can help them, um, if we can help them, navigate their lives better, that's where our editorial independence is rooted in. In lots of countries that I work in, we have lots of organizations that are kind of, inciting people towards hatred or anger towards another group. And that does not help people navigate their lives better, right? It only meets a kind of short-term functional psychological need, but it does not help them navigate their lives better. And these people over time always disappoint. And that's kind of where independent journalism really has a unique competitive advantage. So this is kind of how we think of this, that we use journalism, we provide value to people, and people then can choose to take action in their lives to pursue change. We identify opportunities for information that is relevant and useful for people. We reach people with this relevant, useful information. We build personal relations, direct relationships with them. Um, we provide them with this information, and then they navigate their lives better. And this is how we as journalists can impact change in society. Is another way of organizing it in a way. I've been part of many funding applications in journalism, and this is kind of the theory of change that we articulate. Uh, right? We provide information, people celebrate us, and we want to take a stick back from that and kind of uncouple the two, and then look at the various things that need to happen in between. And the first thing that needs to happen is that we identify information needs that people have, that we deliver on these information needs, that we help people through, I know, a theory of service so that they can navigate their lives better. They are better equipped to decide and act in their lives. They make better decisions, and informed people build stronger communities at scale. Madison.
So we know, like, we are talking about a really big kind of like fundamental reset in the way that we think about journalism, in the opportunities that we spot to create journalism and to bring journalism to people. And this requires a lot of little shifts that build up into the big shift that we talk about, kind of like how we looked at the first two pictures at the beginning that we've seen over the last few years in order to meet the moment. So this requires a lot of new ways about how we think about our roles, what we do in journalism, and the opportunities that we respond to, which Patrick and I have been exploring with our work a bit and have a few insights to share. So first things first, like when we're in conversations with journalists about opportunities for service and interest in responding to and creating service-oriented processes within newsrooms in order to um, research and identify information gaps, learn about what communities need, and create information that then helps them follow the process that Patrick outlined a bit, where we can provide them with something valuable that brings them something useful to their life, whether that's how to navigate an education system better, how to have a conversation with somebody about a news event better, or how to take action in their community about something that they care about, and then use that information to create their own change in their life. We've learned that there's a few things that are holding newsrooms back from starting to create new processes around this, and get out of some of the same cycles that we've found ourselves stuck in, like the clickbait cycles, like optimizing for a greater volume or reach rather than optimizing and creating something more rooted in community needs. And first and foremost, that change is hard, and that it's really easy to be paralyzed and be kind of stuck in the moments that newsrooms have found ourselves in, of like managing competing crises, managing pressures from political forces, managing lots of sudden changes in funding, changes in lots of ways that we use social media, we use websites, and we use platforms um, to create our journalism, and that it can be hard to find and prioritize opportunities just to get out of that. Um, it also brings us to kind of being stuck in tactical thinking. A lot of newsrooms right now kind of feel that they're in this moment of survival, and week by week, month by month, we need to teach ourselves how to um, keep up with the latest update that Facebook made, or keep up with the latest update that Instagram made, instead of finding opportunities and prioritizing that time to go out and research and really understand what their communities are looking for, and create new systems and create new processes to adapt to different approaches. And some of the things that we um, have touched on a bit around measurement. We are in this era where we're rethinking what journalism is about and who is it for. And in order to define that, we have to recreate the way that we measure and think about success and talk about what comes about our journalism. And so we're kind of still in this era where we're focused on follower accounts and page views, and how those contribute to our bottom line in journalism, rather than measuring what our journalism enables people to do, and some of the outcomes that we contribute to in people's lives. And so we're in this moment of reinvention, where there's going to be a lot of experimentation required to move us past some of these areas where we're getting stuck, which brings us to our next point. Um, there's a bunch of opportunities that we're that we're still seeing in this, and there's ways that we can um, start fresh from this moment, even as we are dealing with what it feels like dodgeballs from like all different corners and pressures to how we're producing our work. So um, first and foremost, like some of the opportunities that we're seeing is to whatever act or process of journalism that you are participating in, when you are starting to create a piece of journalism or starting to report on a story, ask yourself how what you're doing is contributing to serving people, and is not just contributing to um, and not just contributing to serving like the greater journalism, serving your institution, or serving some of the watchdog ideas of journalism. It's a lot of reporters. We can easily find ourselves in places of trying to keep up with the journalist narrative and keep up with kind of the grand um, kind of the grand splashy investigations, and the grand narrative of what it means to be a journalist. But as we're saying, that's gotten us more and more far removed from the opportunities that we can serve our audiences. Um, we're also looking at ways that we can, as we mentioned, focus on outcomes and focus on what our journalism enables us to do, and enables people to do, instead of just some of our repeated narratives about the fourth estate and kind of our older age of journalism that we're moving away from. And finally, finding ways to go beyond some of the same strategy in the same ways that we've uh, always done journalism, always created and produced journalism, and finding ways that we can experiment, and places that we can find inspiration that may not always come naturally to us, that requires going out of our newsrooms and further into our communities. So That being said, those are things that we're looking at and that we're thinking about, and that we've been in conversations with newsrooms about. But we heard a lot from you about things that you're curious about for all of these shifts that we're talking about, from trust to business models to how that's influencing the evolving role of journalists and ethics. And so we wanted to take some of the remaining time to discuss your questions. Gabriela, did you want to kick us off here?
Yes, but thank you so much for that. I was, you know, taking a lot of notes and nodding my head along there. I mean, I especially related to when you talked about being in a newsroom, feeling like you're playing dodgeball, and you're just getting pummeled from all sides. You're losing dodgeball, sometimes from all these competing interests. But I think that this is a really fascinating kind of shift from the theory of change to the theory of service. And that to me feels really radical and certainly indicative of where audiences have been leading us for years, but maybe it hasn't felt safe to say, like, I think we need a new approach here, which is always the challenging part. So, yes, I think that we had so many great questions from our audiences about exactly what we've been talking about here. I think sometimes the production of the news can by itself seem like it's a somewhat esoteric pursuit. It's just kind of like, what do you mean that you're a journalist? How does that work? And so I'm really happy to share these questions and to also open it up at the end here for the audience to kind of ask us about the work that we do. I'll have more questions here. But just to kick it off with the trust and misinformation part of it, because this is something that I know at RMPBS we've certainly thought about. I didn't actually go too much into my own background. I grew up here in Colorado, watching RMPBS, and I then, after college in Boulder, I moved to New York City, and I was a reporter there for 15 years. I started out as a beat reporter, actually at one of these iterations of the new media at a billionaire hyperlocal startup news where I was a beat reporter and really just saw a lot of these things as well. Where as a journalist, as a young journalist, I would think, why is my story about the water main break on First Ave doing better than the story I spent 3 weeks on about, the the school closing because of whatever reason? Because there are sort of different tracks. Sometimes as journalists, we think, well, this story is important, but you're right, it's not connected. And after I worked there at the Daily News, I moved on to NBC, which launched me, threw me into public media because I did feel this disconnect and I wanted to be more part of a solution and a conversation in the community, not so much keeping up with the news ecosystem, which can certainly drive coverage as well. So that's sort of a little bit of my trajectory. It absolutely tracks with everything you talked about there. So I felt really seen. Um, so I did want to talk about this because we talk about it a lot in the news, and it's obviously on all of your minds as well, those of you who are here with us tonight, on how can news organizations restore trust and address political polarization. That's a big question. Even if you took a cursory look at the news today, it's a very big question for how the media is showing up even for itself. So not to put you on the spot, Madison, but did you have some thoughts about that, some insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I think over the past like 10 years or so, probably even longer than that, as um, all of our different forms of journalism have started changing so much, we've seen journalists start to like show their cards a little bit more within the reporting process as a way to um, start restoring trust and as a way to you know bring themselves to viewers, bring themselves to audiences wherever they might be, whatever um, whatever perspective they might be looking at their journalism from, and that has involved um, like humanizing themselves and like demystifying the role of journalists and kind of the pedestal and soapbox that we've sat on as a journalist, and doing things that we now in 2025 have seen creators and have seen other information sources do so well, as far as just like um, showing exactly who they are, doing things that we have kind of been taught as journalists and from our traditional roles of journalists not to do, as far as sharing a little bit more about who we are, what our perspective is on the story, and providing a little bit more of that um, firsthand firsthand relationship and firsthand input on the story, as well as not waiting until a story is completely done, or a story almost is like completely developed to report it, but sharing perspective and taking readers along the way of like, here's the reporting process that I've been doing so far, here's the people who I've been talking to so far, here's what I know, here's the questions that I still have, and bringing our readers a little bit more into that. So that's just to say there's both ways of transparency, and both ways of changing the actual way that we do journalism, that news organizations have been like inching and stepping closer and closer to. I think over the past few years, but now especially the moment that we're in, and especially the moment that we're in of like we mentioned, finding ourselves on the same playing field as so many other sources of information, it's caused us to jump in to do that even more. So like you're seeing newsrooms of all shapes and sizes now, whether again you're like really, really small hyper local creators to larger local and national media put their reporters front and center, who may have been hiding behind a desk for the past 40 years reporting on the same beat, now coming to audiences, introducing themselves a little bit more, and sharing their perspective.
Absolutely. I love when I'm on social media and I see journalists doing call outs where they're saying, I'm working on this story about this thing. This is the previous reporting I've done on this. You can reach out to me if you have a question or you want me to follow up on something. I feel like that's kind of like a first step. I mean, I just love seeing that because then people respond and then they think, surely this can't be it. This is how reporters work. And it's just like, yeah, it actually is that simple and that difficult of just like, I'm working on this. I wonder what your thoughts are on it. But I do like it when people show behind the curtain and how it works. Patrick, did you have any more insights into that about like, I mean, the political polarization part is also difficult to address. I mean, you can show your reporting, you can show your work, but that aspect of it, I think, is also a little bit extra complicated.
And it really like plus one to everything that has been said, but also I think another challenge is really in terms of the signals that we look at to see, okay, this is resonating with our communities. I just remember a conversation that I had a couple of months ago with a publisher in I believe it was Georgia, and they saw their page views go up exponentially and their social engagement whenever they reported on a murder or a crime that was happening in their community. And the publisher was kind of exasperated because they were seeing their traffic go away because of platforms sending less traffic from the platforms to this website, and now the AI search results and all of that. And that publisher was telling me like, oh, I can't make murders happen. And it created almost like a perverse economy where you were trying to create like kind of have have content that leads to distribution through these intermediaries that are the platforms that then reach people. And then how can we, so the question is really, how do we get away from that?
Yes.
Because it really, these wrong signals lead us to do things that might not be of service in the long term to the communities that we aim to serve and ourselves as journalists if we want to have some kind of relevance in those communities.
Right. Well, I mean, there's kind of you have to report on a murder in your community if it happens, if you're a local newspaper. But then if you're wanting to keep the folks who came in because they were interested with that story, what's going to be of service to them in the long run, as you were saying, it's not going to be more and more murder stories. Like you can't, I mean, I would hope he wasn't going around fabricating murders, right? Like
No.
that's not what we
No.
want. But I mean that leads to the sustainability question that is always at kind of like at the heart of these conversations because I'm so glad that you mentioned it as this vicious cycle because if you give in to the sort of clickbait for a second, that drives up numbers that then require you to continue to have clickbait that then separates you more and more from the communities you serve because it becomes less and less relevant to those everyday things. So that sustainability question of what are the sustainable funding models for quality journalism that are outside of clickbait, and no one is immune to clickbait, even the most and maybe perhaps almost the most kind of standard, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they fall prey to clickbait as well. So have you in your work come across some sustainable funding models that really dive into the service side of things and less on the clickbait side of things?
Think in this moment we're all searching, but we're also searching in a moment where there is a fundamental, like where information ecosystems are distorted and disrupted. So it's if we wanted to create any kind of sustainable model, then we would need to tackle and think about these fundamentals first, which are algorithmic amplification, moderation, all of these things, and that's kind of the infrastructure. It's kind of it's almost like giving rules for drivers without thinking about what roads should look like, and that's really really tricky. I'm a huge fan and worked many years, and I'm still working with public media organizations globally, and one of the things that typically come up in these conversations is like, how do you distinguish yourself from commercial media? How do you distinguish yourself from individual creators and others? And in that, I think I there was a Knight Commission, I think bit more than 10 years ago, I think 2000, I'm going to get it wrong, maybe almost 20 years ago, that looked at information needs that are fundamental for a society to exist or community to exist. And they identified so-called civic information needs, like education, transportation, job opportunities, what governance, what have you. And I think these are the areas, I think Madison mentioned them in her slides, that where public media is really, really important. And we need to make sure that that is funded either in some public form or
Mhm.
through philanthropy, but with clear intentionality around providing information services around these topics to people so that people can navigate their lives better.
I'm also a huge fan of public media, so big relief to hear you say that. Love public media. I agree. I think that we are very lucky to exist in that space and to think about service in that way. Um, I think at Rocky, well, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Rocky Mountain Community Radio conference at Rocky Mountain PBS. And it was all of these small radio stations from across Colorado in the West, um, kind of sharing best practices, what they're looking forward to, how they're meeting challenges, all of those things. And it was a really kind of invigorating meeting because it was these types of conversations. And one thing that I walked away from thinking very clearly was in public media, we serve the people, we don't serve shareholders. And that automatically shifts your alignment. And so in some ways, we are even more liberated to adopt a theory of service than kind of a legacy media foundation or someone that's a little bit more tied to the previous, and you had in your first slide the radio control room of like that. If that model worked for you, it's much harder to shift. But if you've been working in public media where that's always been the ethos, you can adapt a lot more of these things. We had one of our reporters recently kind of sketch out a beat around food, and you think, oh, well, that's actually pretty important these days, right? And so it was about the snap cuts and where the food pantries were available. And also, if you have $10 for lunch, where are you going to be able to eat? In Denver, all of those kinds of things that um, I'm seeing how what you're discussing in terms of like there will always be an information need around food, how you access it, when it's available, all of these things. Um, that actually opens up how you're able to report even creatively.
I completely, and I mean to kind of the conversation around like connecting those dots of like exactly what you're reporting on and how it fits your organization's ethos and orientation and like the opportunities that you're looking to fill and support in your community to how you're making revenue. I think that there's we're in this great time, like Patrick said, of like we're all figuring it out right now. There's like still question marks, but there's a great time of experimentation for
Yeah.
revenue opportunities across all types of media, all sizes of media, and there's been so much that you're seeing publishers learn from public media traditional models of support through both donation and membership models, and where people are compelled to give and find value in giving because they are filling those unique opportunities for them, like you said, around whether that's around education, whether that's around food, but they're directly seeing how it connects to their life, and it's creating this space for them to participate in and this space for them to belong in. And so that's why you're seeing more and more publishers adapt and experiment with some of these models that public media has been a leader in for revenue streams, as far as memberships, as far as events, and now we're starting to see those in their own and new formats, even for publishers that are not operating on a local model, but to truly bring people around and have a connection with their audience in the way that public media has been known for.
I just wanted to jump in really quick and say there was just a comment in the Q&A that a person, it was an anonymous attendee, said, I'd be happy to help fund virtuous media sources by wasting a moment or two clickbaiting. I don't view it so much as a waste, but rather a valid source of income produced easily by a loyal audience. Just an interesting perspective.
That's a very, very good, I mean, valid perspective as well. I think you talked a little bit in your presentation, and we've talked about before too, about like what do the communities we serve need? And then, there are obviously all of these like sort of foundational ones, education, transportation, all of those ones. But people also need fun, or they need a little bit of I don't want to say scandal, but they need a little bit of excitement, right? All of those things as well. And that's also part of how I'm thinking now from an editing perspective of how you can end up inadvertently or on purpose on a clickbait kind of thing. You know, my question is the longevity of that, as you're trying to reach more people, um, or really foster these kinds of peer-to-peer connections that you're really hoping that you can organize around. But that's a great question. Keep them coming, folks. um, Along those lines, just about like um, the public trust, and again, how are we serving? How are what how does what we publish meet the needs of a particular reader, viewer, attendee? Um, with AI and technology, this is one that we're also learning as we go. It's another one of those dodgeballs that I'm trying to dodge, Madison. Um, how can the public verify news validity against AI generated or altered content? We don't have, we run by the AP style guide and all kinds of different, PBS style guides. But this is happening in real time and there isn't a consensus just yet. So, can you speak to that? Stumped. Um, I can just say for our purposes, um, we don't publish anything that's AI generated. But I thought that the Minneapolis Star Tribune had a really interesting case study where they used AI publicly again, to your point earlier, Madison, about showing the work, and said we used AI to sort through these 40,000 documents to find some emerging themes, and then we sent reporters in to follow up and report on those things. Um, and again, they showed their work and it was used as a tool that they then documented. Are you seeing more and more of those cases? And is that how you're thinking about how to have that validity?
Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's no secret that newsrooms are using AI in a variety of ways, and everybody's figuring out their own steps and processes to figure out AI and especially how they do that with content that goes out in the world. We're seeing both like cases in missteps, like there was a case not too long ago with Business Insider, fully posting AI generated articles and under AI generated bylines um, that that they then got caught for and had to apologize for. And then we're seeing more useful cases like the ones that you mentioned from the Star Tribune and from other local publications that are using AI to help their reporters better understand information, better work through information, and better report on that information and make it and produce it in a way that makes sense for their audiences. And so um, newsrooms themselves are developing standards and developing processes about how they communicate that they're using AI in the content that they publish. But to that same extent of your first question about like how the public can verify news against AI generated or altered content, I mean, every day everybody's coming across content, whether it's directly from AI bots or like chat faces that they are large language models that they're interfacing with, whether they're just on Instagram or social media coming across social media posts that were created with AI, or whether they're coming across content from news organizations that was created with or without AI. And so I would encourage newsreaders and like whatever type of information that somebody is consuming to kind of have and think through their own standards for how they verify news and what their steps are that they're and the indicators that they're taking a look at from information sources, have kind of the same criteria that for everything that you look at in asking yourself what the source is coming from, what the date that it was produced on, where the evidence that the person or the journalist is sorting from, whether you're reading a news article or just listening to a creator, and asking yourself, what the thresholds of this source's motivation might be, whether it's coming from a trusted news outlet or whether it's coming from a content creator or a different actor that may have a pretty particular perspective that they are using to share content and then augmenting that by AI. I
Yeah.
also think, you know, taking time to process information and taking time, as we said and talked about earlier, just to talk about the information that people are reading with other people, sharing it with a friend, asking what they think about it, and asking what else they may see on it can help us weave through some of the noise and some of the dodgeballs.
Mhm. I'm going to ask one last question and then we're going to move on to Q&A. So my last question is, I mean, and this is especially relevant today. We've seen a few cases of this today. Um, why are reporters not challenging elected officials' lies directly or even in the moment?
I
I have an
can
idea, but I'm going to let you go, Patrick.
I'm gonna speak from like non-American contexts, I
hmm
think, and then maybe that can help with looking at the kind of the American context because it is in no way exceptional, even though we often want it to be. Um, and that is often journalists are really, really invested in doing the right thing. And that is because they're very mindful of their role in the institutional processes. So they want to be fair, right? You want to be really fair and you want to make sure you are capturing accurately what people are saying and what have you. And that is comes with the best intentions. However, in situations where the political process uh, is not operating on good faith, there's a huge risk of just becoming, of being reduced to tools of manipulation and disinformation. And that has been particularly the case in Russia and the Russian disinformation campaigns that have become deeply cynical, where you see politicians or people who are working in kind of the public sphere that are funded by Russia intentionally increasing polarization to then have journalists then cover that polarization and then further polarize people.
Yeah.
And that has been a strategy that has worked really well for a certain group of autocrats and kleptocrats and globally. And I'm not speaking necessarily about the American context. I'm speaking about especially the Russian context. And um, and I think that's kind of where the challenge lies. When you are invested in doing right to institutions, sometimes that only works when the institutions are invested in doing right to people. And that's kind of why we're trying to move away from this kind of focus on institutions and shifting that focus to people. What is this person saying right now? How does it affect you in your life? That is what matters, not necessarily kind of the back and forth and accusations that people are hurling against each other and like, the political discourse kind of in itself. I've seen that in my own life as a reporter in Hong Kong in the last years of kind of when parliamentary debate there was still active. It just turned into a constant fight. And people at the end said, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And they kind of distanced themselves further from democracy. So it's kind of an ironic, a sad irony that like if we want to preserve democracy, we really need to step away from the institutional prism and really focus on people.
I love that. Thank you so much, Patrick. We're going to kick it off for some Q&A questions. I know Amber and Alex might have a couple for us.
Yeah, we have three questions that are pending. One from Beth Nelson. She says,
Hi, Beth.
In response to Patrick's question in chat about beats and combining it with serving the community, artists are suffering in this economy. A healthy society needs artists. More emphasis on local artists both serves and informs. Gabriela, I think you actually might have a little response for that.
Nice setup, Amber. Thanks. Yes. We have an the way that our newsroom is structured, we are structured on beats, Patrick and Madison. Our reporters each have geographic beats around the Colorado, but they also have kind of cultural beats. So we have a reporter who focuses on immigrants and refugees. We have a reporter who, as I mentioned earlier, is now writing about food in all of its dimensions. And we have a brand new reporter who's focused on arts and culture in Colorado and in Denver. And she, I think, came in a little bit nervous about getting into her beat. And I think one weekend was just like, I have work for the next 6 months. To your point, Beth, about artistic communities, how they're organizing themselves, how they respond to communities, and how artists themselves operate. In the same way that funding for public media was rescinded earlier this year, the National Endowment for the Arts, all kinds of arts funding, grants that were sent through universities and through collectives were also kind of shut down. And then because of the atmosphere and the uncertainty about what's coming up next, I know that a lot of artists, even if they weren't in the academy, were not getting access to grants because funders were maybe a little bit shy about going forward. So you're absolutely right, Beth. It is imperative that we continue to feature artists, feature their work. Kuvo and the Drop, our stations here, also are all about that. As a matter of fact, they have a Jazz Odyssey tonight with local artists elsewhere in Denver. So it is true that artists, journalists, crucial, crucial in any community when you're talking about building trust, building kind of like a common culture, common understanding, all of those things. That's also really important. So I absolutely hear you, Beth. Yes.
So we have two more questions, and I'm going to ask them both. They're different questions, but I just want to make sure that you're all able to answer them in the time that we have. So one is for guests, what are the most creative news products you have seen that are both fun to engage with and clearly meet explicit community needs? That's the first question. The second one is, from your experience, is it easier for tenured journalists to untrain themselves on older models or to train novice creators, journalists, how to do service journalism?
I can start with answering that first question on the news products that kind of gets a little into the discussion about arts too. I'll share a news product that a newsroom that I work with, Dos Puntos platform that I mentioned at the beginning, a small hyper-local news platform in Philadelphia serving serving Latin immigrant audiences within the region. And this product was kind of a collaboration between a lot of different roles in the community. The newsroom created a print poster mural newspaper on how to, for Latin parents to, that outline steps on how to enroll children in preschool and in pre-K, as that's the beginning of the education system, and all the different requirements and application forms that parents needed to fill out in order to enroll children. And so the process for this print newspaper, which I could say is probably about as big as my wingspan, was collaborating with a local education nonprofit who had expertise and had on these processes and had research and reports on some of the most common friction points that Latin parents were struggling and experiencing gaps in the system of trying to enroll their children in school, and then collaborating with local designers and artists to illustrate it into being a mural print poster newspaper so that it could be something that would be inviting to hang up, whether it was in being posted within social service centers, local education centers, or even within schools themselves, and also something that you could think about and consider hanging up within a children's room. So it's, I can drop a link to in the chat,
Beautiful.
but it's something very colorful and exciting and inviting to look at. So both fun to engage with and tapping into a need.
And on the retraining, I think like one example just comes to mind that is a dear friend of mine who worked in traditional media for a very long time as an investigative reporter and had this moment of burnout where he decided I'm gonna no longer do this anymore. Kind of I don't want viral like chase virality on the platforms. And he started a youth hostel that had weekly gatherings where people discussed, what is happening in their town. So this is a story that was in Taiwan. And and when he was doing that, he then turned these gatherings into podcasts. And these podcasts then became one of the most listened to podcasts in the country. And what he was telling me then as when we reconnected was that he didn't realize that like he thought he was leaving journalism, but actually he found a purer form of journalism. And I think that's kind of a journey that we're all going through, is really rooting our work in the lived experience of the societies, the communities that we live in, and then really use those skills that we have honed through years of training, of inquiring, of asking tough questions, of digging deeper, of understanding the other side of a story to really help communities understand themselves better, help people make better decisions in their lives. It's just what's the hard part is just that initial step of stepping out of the formulaic expressions that we have been socialized in, learned for so many years, and just having that focus on service.
I love both of those. I think for mine, I'm gonna also drop it in the chat, and Alex can share with everyone. I found the Green Line, which is a Toronto-based hyperlocal organization to me embodies everything that we've discussed tonight. And I loved it so much it actually gave me energy as a journalist. And I so love hearing from you, Patrick, about your friend experiencing that he was feeling like a purer form of journalism, because when you're trained as a journalist, when you work on a beat, when you work in a newsroom, there is a professionalization that happens, that you understand these tips and tricks. But like most journalists get into it because they love talking to people, they want to know what's going on, and they want to kind of be useful in some kind of way. And to me, the Green Line is sort of going back to that. So for all the folks here tonight, this is where they take like a subject. I guess, right now it's about small business communities in Toronto. And what they'll do is they'll report on that, kind of traditionally, they'll report on that. But then they'll have all of these community events where they'll bring people together and they'll say, does this work? Does this, answer your question? What is actually going on for you? And like they'll have all these conversations over time. And then over the course of that quarter or however long they're having this particular conversation for, then they'll have like an action part or discussion part, or like this is something that can be useful. Previously, they've done work, for example, on tenants' rights. That's when I first saw them, was on tenants' rights. And their action was this is how you can unionize your apartment building. It's like, this is how you can do it. This is how you can sue your landlord if they're not taking care of your needs. I thought that was absolutely incredible. Just a really focusing on a very, very, um, important need. For this one, it's like, how do you start a small business in Toronto if you're an immigrant or if you're low income? How do you do it? Um, and then they get curious about it, and then they get humble about it, and then they come back and they kind of get creative about it. I just think that's so cool. And really just continually inspiring to me. I love the work that they're doing. And I think that there is these kinds of models are emerging. These kinds of things are happening. And it's really exciting. And I think the second question that you asked, Amber, was about if it's easier for older journalists to like change their spots, or if it's easier to, yeah, exactly. Or if it's easier to just train new journalists. Um, I think that it has to be like everything else in journalism. It has to be messy and complicated and hard. And that means that the older journalists have to get uncomfortable and start doing things like showing their work or like saying, well, this was my frame of reference when I asked this question. And it was that, like this because of this, which is so uncomfortable when you have been taught that that is the most unprofessional thing you could do. And then younger journalists have to be like, all right, maybe there is a value in like, critically hitting back at someone who I may feel sympathetic towards because there is another side to this that's just as valid to the person who's living that experience. And that requires a certain kind of not skepticism, but a little bit of a detachment from what you think the story might be to actually get more voices, get more perspectives involved. So I would say it has to be a messy, complicated interplay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna choose complicated every time.
Thank you, Gabriela. I'm going to share a couple just super quick comments, and then I'm going to ask each of you to do sort of a lightning close for yourselves. So one comment was comment, not question. This is particularly for you, Gabriela. I appreciate the new lunch break newsletter. As a consumer supporter of RMPBS, I've quickly adapted to looking for it. I always skim the graphs on often click through the read more button. The variety of around the state stories is content I'm not seeing elsewhere. So very cool to get
Thank
some
you. That
kudos
is so
for
nice to
our
hear.
new
Thank
product.
you. Yeah.
And then Beth was just agreeing with you, Beth Nelson, again, wonderful point on Green Line. This is how you can features. So I think that's also feedback for us, is like that kind of taking action in that way, she thought was really poignant. So y'all have about basically a minute each, minute and a half to just say whatever you'd like to close our session together. And it's an exercise in sharpness.
I'll
Patrick,
say
you
thank
want
you
to
so
go?
much for
Oh,
everyone.
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Gabriela.
Thank you so much to everyone, to Madison and to Patrick, to you and to Alex for putting all of this together. Also for all of you who were here with us tonight and asking these amazing questions, and continue to stay engaged in this way. We're listening, we are trying to adapt, and you hold us accountable, and we are here to serve you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just start by thank you again, everybody who attended tonight and for submitting all your great questions. And I hope we can offer a little bit perspective on them, but just to underscore what Patrick mentioned earlier, like this is a moment that we're all figuring out together as we're finding ourselves in new spaces, we're finding ourselves in new challenges and how to get through them. And Gabriela, like I really appreciated the framing you just offered about both the like a journalists from like traditional roles finding themselves in new situations, as well as some of our emerging journalists finding themselves in new roles as they're getting into this space. And I think it's not as much as about finding a compromise between those, but about coming together and creating something new and thinking about what opportunities we have to respond to around some of these service, like we just said, that we're finding in creative news products. And so I just encourage everybody, like keep showing up, keep participating in the ways that you are doing, and keep offering your feedback. I mean, there's a ton of ways that you can support news right now, whether it's like if you have financial means to donate to get involved, or if you can offer your time in another way, like showing up tonight or showing up to other events that newsrooms or journalists who you follow are offering. And also if you're really a big fan of something or really care about something and you don't see a space to get involved, reach out and ask about how you can do something and create those opportunities, because this is a really big moment of experimentation and we need everybody who's interested and passionate to get involved.
Just to echo everything that Madison said so comprehensively, and I would just say also as like a former like public media executive, public media don't only need your financial support, um, really need also your guidance and hearing from you. And that's so important, I think, in terms of like just so if you see something, just that mention to the newsletter, that is so, so valuable. And just keep being involved and help the journalists, the public media journalists in your space evolve as we all figure this out together.
And I just want to thank Gabriela from our newsroom, our Senior Director of Journalism here at Rocky Mountain Public Media, PBS, Madison and Patrick. Thank you so much for your time, all of your expertise, experience, and perspective. This has been a powerful conversation. I dropped this in the chat to everybody, but just also to say, please go to the RMPBS YouTube channel where you can see the first two of this 3-part series, and then we will be uploading this one as well within the week. You'll also be receiving a survey after this. Please, please, please answer it. Give us any feedback to help us keep providing the information that you're interested in. This whole session was about that, and we want to meet you where you are and things you're interested in. So share that in the survey, and we'll be glad to respond and get you what you're looking for. Thanks again, everyone, for your time this evening, and have a lovely rest of your week.